What's up, everybody? It is Patrick here with Conversations with Patrick, and oh man, do I have a guest for you. When I interviewed Steve from Jealousy Curve, as soon as the interview ended, and we were just kind of chatting off screen, I said, "There's one person I need to know. Can you get me?" And he was like, "Who is it?" And I said, "John Faye from Ike." And he's like, "Well, just email them through the website." And I was like, no, you need to make the connection. And he's like, "No, seriously, just email them from the website."
Wow, he totally didn't help you out there, Patrick.
No. I think he knew because when I did email
He
you,
knew that I
it
would be
was
a professional. That's
yeah,
that's great.
within 10 minutes, it was like you had responded back, and I was like, "Oh wow!" So thank you so much for
Yes.
taking the
Well,
time,
just
John.
to just to start, Stephen LaFaca is one of my dearest friends, and
Mhm.
it makes total sense to me that he would just want you to take the uh, the pre-designed route.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've known Steven for a while. I mean, not long, not as long as you have. Obviously, I met him when I was band booking at a club in here in my town, and then I actually it was introduced to your music through him through Ike because I actually came to I think it was a World Cafe show where you all played with
Oh,
Jealousy Curve back
right
in
on.
2008, nine, something like that. I can't
Yeah,
remember what it
well,
was. So
we used to do a lot of shows there for sure.
yeah. So that's what I want to start with. Speaking of Ike, let's start with what you have in the future because you have something coming up, right? On May 17th
I
at
do. It's
Milk Boy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it'll be basically what we're calling like a 20th anniversary celebration. One of our records, actually our second album in real life, is 20 years old this
Mm-hmm.
year. Although weirdly, if you go on Spotify, it says it was released in 2006, which is incorrect. You might recall because I think probably the show that you attended with Ike and Jealousy Curve was on December 26th in all likelihood.
That most likely is it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so I had this habit of putting our records out like 4 days before the year ended. So it was technically released in 2005, but it didn't make it into most of the distribution channels until a week later. So
Okay. Now, and this is something called Asian American Pie 2. Give
yes.
give give give
So
people some context on that.
the Asian American Pie idea is something that my friend Judah Kim, who is a fellow Asian American musician, and I came up with last year. We were just talking casually about how when we were coming up, we didn't really know any other Asian American musicians, much less band leaders. And we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we put together a show where every lead singer was of Asian heritage? And so we started this thing last year, and we had five artists, all of whom had Asian front people, and it went really great. This year, we're doing it at Milk Boy, which is awesome because of the way their shows are set up. We're keeping it to three acts this year. So it's myself via Ike doing our reunion, Judah Kim, and a great band called Kikushima, which is fronted by this badass, half Japanese, half Mexican woman who, like, when people see this band, they just go crazy because she's just an amazing performer, great guitar player, great singer. It's going to be really cool.
Very, very cool. Now, Monk Boy, I'm not familiar with that venue. I know some Philly venues. I'm in West Virginia, so I know
Yes.
some Philly venues. What's kind of the capacity? How big of a crowd are
Milk
you
Boy
expecting?
is what you would call a sort of a lot of small touring bands come through Milk Boy, so the capacity is in the 200 range.
Okay,
It's a very rock and roll kind of place. It's right in the heart of Center City. It's 11th and
nice.
Chestnut Street, and we're very excited to be doing the show there. It's going to be like, not a polite sit down kind of thing. It's going to be a sweaty rock and roll evening, which we're very, very pumped about.
So it almost sounds like it's almost a Grape Street Jocelyn's type of a place. Is that what that may have?
Well, much bigger than Jocelyn's.
Okay, okay, okay.
But
Same atmosphere. Yeah.
the old Grape Street, if
Hmm.
you had ever attended a
Yep.
show
Hmm.
in Philly when it was actually not on Grape Street, it was on Main Street in Manayunk. That was a bigger, like you could fit about 200
Okay.
plus.
Cool.
So I would compare it to that. Yeah.
Okay. And are you guys going to be playing in real life, like straight through front to back, or is that what the plan is?
Yeah, the plan is to
Okay.
play the whole album, but I have proposed to the rest of the group that we go back to front.
Interesting.
So we
Okay.
might, well, we used to, the 10th song on In Real Life is a song that we actually used to start a lot of our shows with.
Okay.
It's got this really cool kind of tom-tom intro. And so I just said, well, why don't we just, who cares if it's front to back or back to front, I mean, so we may actually play it in reverse, which would be
Okay.
kind of,
Well, I have to tell you, and I'm going to be honest with you. When I originally messaged you, I told you that you Ike had put out two of my all time favorite songs, and I think you all have a three-song progression, or however you want to put it, on in real life that I'll put up against any three songs on any album,
wow.
straight up.
What are those songs?
It's Into Philadelphia, Just a Moment, and then I Knew You Win. Those three
Wow.
songs together,
Wow,
just
man.
yeah. And
That means a
especially,
lot. Thank you.
absolutely. And especially after reading the book and finding out where the story of Into Philadelphia came from,
Yeah.
that even adds more meaning to it when I hear that. So,
Oh,
mhm.
that's really, really cool. It's been very kind of an interesting experience for me. Like I don't spend a ton of time going back and listening to 20-year-old albums that I sang on most of the time. So
Mhm.
going back and listening to this record a few times just to sort of refamiliarize myself with it has been a really kind of fun experience because it in many ways it feels like I'm listening to it again for the first time.
Very
And
cool. Hmm.
some of the choices we made in the studio, some of the production, I'm sort of it's triggering my memory about like, oh, I remember how we did that, and I remember how, Phil
Hmm.
Niccolo had to splice the tape for some stuff, like it was even at the time, I guess we recorded in probably 2004, most of it. And at the time there was like a global 2-inch tape shortage. So and most bands were recording in Pro Tools by that point. It was kind of different to do an analog record, especially as an indie band. But when we talked to Phil Niccolo about producing it, he was pretty adamant that he wanted to record on tape. And after we agreed to that, then he slipped in, oh, by the way, there's an international tape shortage and every reel is going to be about $390.
So he
So
convinced
you
you,
get
then
like,
dropped the bomb.
yeah, so you get like, enough space for like maybe two songs per reel.
Hmm.
And so, it kind of like upped our recording budget pretty substantially, but it was so worth it. I mean, when you listen to In Real Life, it's
Yep.
a very warm, analog sounding record released at a time when stuff was very digital sounding. So it was a really good decision that we were really happy with.
Where was that album recorded? I know when we'll get to the Caulfields, I know in the book you detail
Yeah.
that was recorded. Where was in real life recorded though?
In Real Life was recorded at Studio 4, which is Phil Nicolo's studio. Like he started Studio 4 in the 80s at a different location where he and his brother Joe Nicolo were the Butcher Brothers. In the 90s, you probably remember that they produced like some really awesome records, not the least of which was Saturation by Urge Overkill, which is one of my
Wow.
favorite
Yeah.
guitar albums of that era,
Hmm.
and a big plus when you're deciding on who to record your four-piece rock band with. And
Absolutely.
so it was a great experience to record there. It obviously, if you're from Philly, you definitely know how many great things they've done in that studio, from from the Hooters early stuff or and remixes for them, and they've had or Phil and Joe had great success with the Fugees because
Mm,
they had their own, or Joe was part of Rough House Records, which was a very successful label. They had the Fugees and like House of Pain and stuff
okay.
like that. But the experience of recording at Studio 4 was definitely very integral to the sound of the record. When I look back, and I've made a lot of records since then, there's always little things that you hear in a less mature version of yourself in terms of performance and that kind of thing. I mean, even when I listen to Just a Moment, like I think I sing it so much better now, you
Mm,
know. And I'm like, and I think part of it is that I like literally remember what the session was like when I was cutting that vocal. And I think I talk about that song a little bit in the book,
you do.
actually.
Hmm.
Um, when I wrote that song, it was part of a series of songs that I had written um, in silence. In other words, I composed the song without ever like really belting it out. And so like the first couple times that we performed the song, my voice cracked pretty bad on the choruses. And I was like, oh no, I'm not very good at singing this. So it took a lot of reps to try to get it to where I was hitting what was in my head. And I definitely remember recording in the studio. Like it just it wasn't one of those songs where, I mean, most of the time I'll do like a full take and very, very minor tweaks. And this one was pretty piecemeal, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
Phil was like, "Do you want to just do the verses first so you don't like blow your voice out on chorus one and that kind of thing."
Well,
But again, like
mhm.
I listen back to the record with a lot of affection for the most part. I'm not one to really get too bogged down in little things that don't matter to anybody but me.
Like you hear that one little thing and go, "Oh, that 1 second could have changed this way or that way or
Right.
something." Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
it would make it more pleasurable for my listening experience, whereas like nobody else on earth even like hears it, you know.
What is your songwriting process? I'm always curious to ask this question when I talk to songwriters. Do you kind of have a melody in your head first and then put a lyrics to it? Is it more of a poem that you write that you go to like somebody like Brett or somebody like that and say, "Hey, I have this little snippet of words. What can we do with it?" How does that work
Um,
for you?
My process has kind of changed a lot over time. And, if you allow me to go like way back into like
Sure.
my earliest efforts at doing this, I didn't play guitar when I first started writing songs. So all I could do was hum my ideas to somebody that did know how to play guitar. And so I think that in addition to a lot of other factors about how my musical tastes evolved, I would say that made me very kind of rooted in the mentality of melody being at the forefront of what I'm doing. So a lot of times I might have like a melody with no words. Um, as you know, like Paul McCartney would like put gibberish lines in melodies all the time. Yesterday was scrambled eggs at first,
Yep.
apparently.
Mhm.
So, um, very often I'll do something like that just to sort of keep the melody in my head. But more so these days, it really is sort of a combination of everything at once in a lot of ways. I'll have a title, and as soon as I get that title, as opposed to trying to like, okay, I have a title, what's the first verse? The first instinct that I have is to try to figure out how that's going to sing. And once I have that, then usually I'll grab a guitar and start feeling out some kind of early direction of the song. I actually wrote a new song 2 nights ago that was very much that process. I had had a title or the key line or the hook line of the song in my phone for probably like a year. And sometimes you just have these things and you're waiting for the thing to spark the development of the idea.
Okay.
So I just keep a bunch of crap in my phone, just not knowing if it'll ever become anything. And and so, this song, because it's so fresh in my mind, it was very much okay. I have that line, and I just started singing it. And that kind of leads to this domino effect where you're like, okay, well, what chords sound good as I'm singing this? And then you have a feel and you have, where's it going to go from there? And so like every step kind of is rooted in the last thing that you did, the previous thing.
And is that how the new album's written? You have the new album out. The Long Game came out a couple months ago in December.
Yeah.
Is that kind of was that kind of the songwriting process on this album as well?
I would say so. I mean, I think that the new record differs in a way from pretty much all my previous stuff in that it's the first one that I recorded basically all of by myself at home, with some notable exceptions. Um, and so the first couple of songs that ended up on the album were written during the 2020 into 2021, isolation
Yeah,
periods.
yeah.
um, and so I really leaned into kind of home recording, doing stuff in Logic on my laptop. And I think it really opened up some new horizons for me sonically, because I wasn't particularly concerned with what people that might be in my band would do. I
Okay.
just wanted it to sound cool to my ears. And so certain things, um, you brought up Brett earlier. Some of the guitars are very Brett-esque, and I'm like, well, what would he do here? I mean,
Okay.
but in a lot of ways, there's sounds on the Long Game that we don't really try to replicate live. And the couple times that we've played some songs together in an electric situation, because I mean, for example, the title song, "The Long Game," has a sitar sound in it,
Mhm.
but it's used very, very um, lightly. It only happens a couple of times. It would certainly not be worth it to bring a sitar player on stage
Right.
and just tell them to go bang for like three times. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
um,
Well, one of the times recently you've played the Long Game is the event you had a couple weeks ago, the Shine a Light event. What is that? I know it's already passed, but I'm
oh,
assuming it's an
so
annual event. So, what is that for?
Yeah. So yeah, that I didn't play any of my originals at, but
Oh,
Shine a
okay.
Light it's a charity concert that's based in Delaware, which is where I grew up and where the
Hmm.
Caulfields hail from. And actually, three of us participate in this concert every year. I mean, I think Sam and I have done it for the last 4 years. Richie's actually been in it since the very beginning, so like 13 years. Um, but it's basically a event that raises money for children's music education in Delaware. And they really like do it up. They get like probably upwards of 60 different musicians involved.
Nice. Hmm.
And then they have a theme every year. And there's roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 plus songs, each with a dedicated different combination of those 60 musicians.
So, what was this year's theme?
They did a thing called A to Z, which so previously they would do like 1981, 1982,
Uh-huh.
I mean, so I think they wanted to do something a little different this year. So I believe that it's kind of like a greatest hits of stuff that had been done in the show
Okay.
previously, but just
Mhm.
based on the alphabet. and numbers 1 through 10, actually. So a lot of song, so I guess 20, what, 26 letters in the alphabet plus so 36 tunes,
Okay.
basically.
But that's
Um,
it's great. Well, it sounds like a great worthwhile cause too, because that
oh
is
yeah,
something that you hear about all the time in education and whatnot like that. That's normally one of the first things cut when anybody talks about budget. So,
agreed, agreed. It is something that we all feel strongly about, and it's not a cheap event to attend,
mhm.
like this is like $75 or something. So you really got to be committed to the cause.
Well,
Um,
that's like $2 a song. That's you
That's
look at
how that's how we look at it.
that.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
All
But
right.
yeah, it's a great event, and I'm very always happy to be part of it. It's a really cool thing to do.
Great. I like to talk about the book now.
Sure.
Fascinating. It's going to take me an hour to read the title, so let me get to. No, I'm joking. If you're watching the video, you can see I have the cover on the screen now. It's the yin and yang of it all: rock and roll memories from the cusp, as told by a mixed up, mixed race kid. I think I got it right.
All right. Bravo. Yeah, I don't even say the subtitle
Okay.
anymore when I'm talking about the book. I mean, if people have a copy in their hand, they can dig a little deeper. But
What
yeah.
what compelled you? Was this something that had been in your mind for a while? Had you been kind of working on it for a while, or did somebody approach you and say you're the type of person that should write a book, or how did this come about?
Well, I did have it in my head for a while, and I have been told throughout my life and career that I should write a book. Now, that doesn't always translate to somebody actually dropping everything out of their life for 6 years and doing it,
Hmm.
but um, I would say that the real impetus for seriously thinking about it was when my mom passed in 2012. And when I was at her celebration of life, there was a very nice um, little booklet that my family put together as sort of a little bit more of a keepsake for people than the standard, business card size card. Um, and it was very beautiful, but as I was reading through it, it still felt very, I mean, of course, by design, you can't do a complete job in that kind of thing. And so I kind of felt that her story um, needed to be illuminated a little more.
Okay.
And for a while, I thought, what should I try to like dig up a lot of information on her younger years and write some kind of biography about her? And I very quickly realized that that would be not a good idea for me. I don't think I would have done a great job. I don't speak Korean. I don't, a lot of the things that I would need to learn are when she lived there as a younger person. So it made more sense as I thought about it more and more to tell my own story, which is so inextricably wrapped up in hers. Like,
Yep.
our stories are very intertwined for the amount of years that we were in our mother-son relationship. And so that's kind of how I got the motivation to really begin. And to be honest with you, it still took several years after that initial thought to actually do it
Okay.
because I didn't, I had never written a book before. I didn't even know if I could. And so I actually around 2012 or 2013, I got a Tumblr blog. I started. You remember Tumblr?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I wrote a few, I guess, essays, like short essays on there that I would share, and that was inching me a little bit closer to actually pulling the trigger on writing it. But I mean, as life goes, there was too much going on in my life in the few years after my mom passed for me to even think about what it would take to do that. And so it wasn't until about 2017 that I guess, sort of saw that opportunity to start. And one other thing that I'll say that I think is pretty significant is that I had put out a solo album of mine called Meddling Kid in 2015. And I was I was realizing at that point that I could kind of do the same thing year after year, put out some songs, go play a bunch of shows, go back and write more
Mhm.
songs. It would be very cyclical, and my life had been fairly, cyclical. I mean, my whole life, in many ways, was rooted in the idea of the album cycle.
Mhm.
And so I was really craving change at that point and realizing that I was ready to embrace change in a way that I perhaps hadn't been in earlier in my life. So I decided in 2017, all right, I'm just gonna like I spent this part of the summer with my sister who lives out in Washington State. And she said, well, you can come here and hang out as long as you want, and you can work on your book.
Mm, okay.
So I took a lot of time leading up to that to read slash listen on Audible to a number of other memoirs because I didn't, like, how do you do it? Like, you have to actually look at how people do it, how things are structured, what's the style of writing, you're basically starting from scratch. Even though I'm a songwriter, I was desperately looking for crossover between the two things, but it's not really the same thing on too many levels.
Well, I got to
uh,
tell you, I love how it is structured. You brought up the structure of the book. I love how it is structured with the letters to the 8x10 in between those band stories and band
Thank
moments.
you.
I think like you said, it's a perfect wraparound for your mother as a way to honor her in telling that story of yours too. And I really enjoyed those little breaks and those letters to the 8x10 breaks that have how you structured it.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
The main, like the first big chunk of that kind of writing, like the first time you see the letter to an 8x10 in the book, was essentially one of the first things that I wrote for it. And there was a period of time when I was like, should the whole book just be like me talking to her about my life? And that also proved unrealistic. um, there were just too many things where it's, like in order to get like exposition on things and in that format, like I would have to like act as if I'm telling my mother stuff that she obviously would know in order for the reader to know. So I was like, well, that's dumb. I can't do that. So I just sort of decided like, well, these pieces are going to be like, um, I don't know, palate cleansers or something that, maybe like takes everything back into a very personal space after telling broader kinds of stories like about my career and my, ascension into wherever it is I was going,
And it absolutely works. It does. It's a great balance between those two worlds of you can almost, and particularly when you get talking about your house and when you're going back to the house or what I'm sitting there, I can almost feel like I'm inside the house or pulling up to the house with you. It's so well done in that
Oh,
regards.
thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And that means a lot to me because those memories are extremely dear to me. Like me holding on to what the experience in that house on Bisbee Road was is it's just something that's very, very central to who I am. and I've driven past it numerous times since writing the book. And, it's bittersweet because the people that own it now, they, obviously they made it their own.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
there's a lot of aspects of, when you're looking at it and driving by it, like, I have to imagine things that I once
Hmm.
could see there in front of my face. But by the same token, um, there's actually so much more material from life in that house that probably didn't make the book because there was just, I mean, every formative experience that happened up until I was like basically an adult in my 20s
Hmm.
happened there, so it's pretty significant.
Just want to pull some quotes out now that I
Okay.
kind of highlighted. I read it in Kindle and I'm highlighting as I'm reading. And you talk about the first one I'm going to ask about is you talk about your mom coming to see you. I think it was at the Wilmington Opera House you mentioned in the book, or I
Oh,
could
Grand
be
Opera
wrong.
House. Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
and it was in your almost wild phase, I guess you could say, where you talk about coming out with a toilet seat around your neck and everything like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
And you
I don't know if I would call it my wild phase. That's my theatrical idiot phase.
and you say, in the time and place you were raised, obligation to family always trumped the individual. Do you still believe that today? Do you still believe that is the idea and the culture today? Because we seem to have a world full of what I'm going to term momingers, and you know what I'm talking about there,
Mhm.
where they seem to want to take over their kids' lives and make it their own. Whereas you seem to have the experience of your mom just letting you do what you wanted within reason and supporting it without her taking it over.
Right. So, well, the first part of your uh, question there,
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't know that I always felt like obligation to family meant everyone else around me.
Okay.
That was just kind of like how I felt. Um, I mean, I believe I said that in the book as in the context of um she was just being kind.
Yeah. And I got
You know
that.
what I
Yeah.
mean?
I
Yeah.
absolutely got that. But
Um,
it,
but yeah,
it's.
but no, I mean, I will say this. Yes. My mom was a very laissez-faire parent.
Okay.
Particularly by the time things got around to me. She had three daughters who were all,
Mm-hmm.
teenagers by the time I was born, essentially. And I don't know, as a single mom, I could see her being like, I'm tired, dude. Do whatever the hell you want. You know what I mean?
I
Just
guess what I'm
in
wondering
her
is
way.
because you are in, you've basically been in the music industry your entire life. I mean, that is your life. And I guess, have you seen that the attitude of parental support change from we're going to support you versus we want to run it? I guess is kind of
Oh,
have you
look,
seen that?
listen, of course. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
was all it's separate from being like in the music industry, like more so telling is being a teacher,
Okay.
which I was.
Mm-hmm.
I was a rock school band coach
Yep.
and I taught songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
And so, particularly in my bubble of watching young musicians grow up and try to do their thing, I would say for better or worse, and in some cases it is better, and in some cases it's worse. Parents are much more involved in that aspect of their kids' lives, and it probably does expand well further, whether it be like you're the parent of an athlete, the parent of a painter, a parent of a ballerina, ice skater. If you're a parent of a musician, there's stuff available to you that just was not available to
Okay.
our to my generation. I mean, the whole reason you formed a band was because you were like looking for something to do, and you had a friend that you know had a thrift store piece of crap guitar, and you know as you know from reading the book, like I was coveting my friend Keith's drum set for
Yep.
quite a while
Mhm.
and would just look for excuses to go down and like bang on it without having any knowledge of how to do it. I think now all that stuff is basically structured.
Yep.
Like, oh, you have the slightest interest in playing guitar. Let's put you in the School of Rock or the Blue Bond Music School, which is where I was a band coach.
Okay.
And so, yeah, there's, uh, you know, you can have a level of parental support in those contexts that is still quite healthy, or it could go like way south,
Okay. All right.
like, um,
Okay.
like in the same respect, my son played ice hockey all through middle school and high school. And like when you wouldn't want to talk about like intense parents,
Well,
hockey
sports
parents,
parents, yeah, sports
oh my,
parents in
well,
general.
hockey in particular, though.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, my God, I loved it. Like it was a whole different experience for me.
Hmm.
Because I liked watching sports as a kid up until music took over my life, and then I was like, no sports at all, you know. Um, but obviously, when your kid plays, you got to get right back into the fray with him,
Sure.
and it was actually, I actually miss it
Okay.
uh, because it was just a really really great time of his life, and it made me so involved, and I was just into it.
Great. And this
I'm
this
sure
next
Steve LaFascia told you about his basketball days. Did you talk about that at
Well,
all?
I followed him on Facebook enough to know that. I mean, he had told me he's very good friends with Casey from Preston and Steve and MMR and whatnot. And I know, he talks about sports from Cardinal O'Hare and stuff like that. So I had a feeling he played just by his height. So,
Tall guy, yeah.
yeah.
We actually went to a Cardinal O'Hara girls basketball game recently. He was like, "I'm gonna go to a basketball game. You want to come?" I'm like,
Yeah. Heck
"Yeah."
yeah.
And like maybe we'll see the next Caitlin Clark or whatever.
Exactly.
And it was cool, but that's kind of a cool aspect of him that I really love and don't think gets enough play.
Cool. um, Next thing I want to ask you from the book, and I'm not going to give anything away, so don't worry if you're watching going, oh, Patrick's going to tell us all about the book. I don't have to read it. No, you still need to read it, okay? The puppet, okay? You talk about being on a TV show and there's a puppet off to the side, okay?
Bob, yeah.
Yeah, Bob. And you said this, and I want to ask a follow up on this. I wonder if I was really prepared to do whatever it took to be heard by a wider audience.
Mhm.
And especially since you were a music coach and whatnot like that, what advice would you
Time.
give? Hmm?
Not at the time, though.
Well, okay. What advice would you give somebody now with your experience of how to set that boundary of this is as far as I'm going to go to be heard by a wider audience?
Well, I think every musician who puts themselves out there in a way that is trying to succeed, and everybody has a different definition of success, which I've found over time.
That's
um,
actually on here too, but yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think it's different for everybody. I mean, you have to ask yourself. I think the core question is always, why am I doing what I'm doing? Some people do play music in order to be validated with fame and money and that kind of thing. If you're one of those people, go on the show with the puppet.
Yeah.
Again, everybody has their own comfort level with this stuff. You know what I mean? Like when you're young and clearly the Caulfields would not have signed with A&M if we weren't going for it.
Right.
That's part of why you do it, because they have the ability to expand your audience exponentially. So a lot of the unspoken stuff that goes on in the minds of, those, dudes in their late 20s, 30 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
um, is you do what it takes, whatever it takes. And if your A&M rep is telling you to go on this live TV show that has a fucking puppet that's gonna
You
like,
do it. Well,
you know,
what I found the juxtaposition of it was, in particular, the song you were doing on the show
yeah, in
while the puppet
particular,
is doing that. Yeah,
correct. Like if we were doing like a real happy-go-lucky
yeah.
tune,
Hmm.
might have been a different vibe for me. But I was, we had just started promoting the second single from our album, which is a song called "The Day That Came and Went." There
This
you
album.
go.
Oh, hold on. Where is it? Oh, Zoom's not picking up that
Ah,
album
there
right
it is.
there. Yes.
Mhm. 30 years old this year.
Yep. Hmm.
And the the song is essentially inspired by my father's passing, which happened in 1973 when I was 6.5. And I can't overstate the importance of that song to me.
Yep.
And not only as a way of having dealt with the loss, but as a songwriter. Like I,
Hmm.
to this day, consider it my first truly great song.
Okay.
Like I think it's really good.
It is.
And
It is outstanding.
I mean, and one of the reasons I think it's good is because it accomplishes what I really wanted to do. Like anybody can like maybe write like a knee-jerk kind of grieving song like 6 months after somebody dies. Like this took like 20 years.
Yeah.
So with all that context, we're on live TV. The guy, oh my God, what is the dude's name? The host.
It was Tom Bergeron, wasn't it?
Tom Bergeron, who would
Yeah.
eventually be like Dancing with the Stars
Yep.
and you know, America's Funniest Home Videos, all that stuff. Um, we're just doing an interview. And then he's like, well, why don't you do the song? I mean, we didn't know ahead of time that there was a puppet involved because we weren't generally up early enough to watch these kinds of shows. And it
Sure.
was early FX cable, you know. So it just came as a shock and one that while we were playing it, I just felt real icky about it.
Now that okay, that's a follow-up question. At that point in time, and this might be an unfair question to ask because you have, so much, the hindsight's always 2020 type thing.
Yeah,
Had you known about the puppet before you went on the show, would you have gone on the show?
that's a really good question. As you know, that whole story is from a chapter called Speak Up. And that was not something that I was good at doing either as a professional musician or as an Asian American guy or in general.
Okay.
I was a wallflower my whole life before all of this started happening. So I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Hmm.
Maybe I could have prepared myself better so that sometimes if you know something's going to be dumb going in, you can kind of like give yourself a little ironic distance when you're doing it.
Hmm.
Uh, but because I felt so ambushed by the puppet, it was just, uh, I think that really colored like how I felt about it.
Okay.
Performance, from what I recall, and I think there's footage somewhere of it, which I will not watch, um, was good.
Hmm.
It's not like I had a meltdown because of the puppet, but
Sure.
like internally, I was like, this is bullshit.
Yep.
Um, and so, it's just one of those stories, and it's sort of indicative of many little what we'll call micro indignities that people um you know people especially back then, the perception is, well, if you have a record deal, life is grand. And in many ways it's grander than the one you just had.
Hmm.
Getting some of your bills paid, and you're playing to more people, and your exposure level is greater, and you're being written about, and all those things that you dream of are kind of happening. But everything comes at a cost. There's a trade-off for everything. So to get more exposure, you got to do these dumb things, you know. And so and they don't really tell you ahead of time because the record company's attitude is we just spent $150,000 to make your record. We're giving you more tens of $1,000s to run around the country in this van.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna do the thing with the puppet. We're not gonna tell you.
Well, and you brought up something that actually leads right into my what my next question was going to be, because you also mentioned in the book about getting a specific album, like, lying on the floor, closing your eyes, putting the headphones on, and listening to it. It's Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, and then
Yeah.
when you get to track 6, I think it is, which is Sloop Zombie, which is a phenomenal, phenomenal song. It really is.
Yeah.
And you write that like this: at that moment, for me, music was no longer just a nice place to visit. I lived there. It was now my home.
Yeah.
Do you think that today, someone in that age bracket, I can't remember how old you were when that occurred for you,
I was in high school.
high school, okay, can have that same experience the way music is done now, where it seems to be more of a singles mentality as opposed to a whole album that you can devour at once mentality?
Well, look, let's not forget that 1964 was a singles mentality too. You know what I mean? Like people were buying 45s and they were ingesting music two sides at a time.
Yeah, but I
You know
think
what I mean?
you're right back then. But you would they were ingesting music two sides at a time with the expectation of an album somewhere down the road.
Yeah.
Almost today, it doesn't seem that way. Today, it seems like
Well,
artists like to release one, two songs here, then wait a year and put another song out, type thing.
I don't think that that's what people like. I think that that's just the world we live in. You have to
Okay,
adapt to the world.
okay,
And the fact of the matter is, I'm not saying you're saying this at all, but
hmm,
like I always have a response to the it was better then, it sucks now kind of comment that
yeah,
you hear a lot,
hmm,
which is you're getting lazy, dude. You're
hmm,
not looking hard enough because there's great bands currently. There's great albums currently being made by these great bands. So if you want to dig as hard as you did when you were 17 years old, it's out there.
okay,
I go
mhm,
out in Philly probably on average, well, less now because I'm freaking old, but still.
uh
I mean,
huh,
I went to 3 shows last week,
okay,
all current artists, all people half my age, all super passionate, super talented, making music, putting out albums.
okay,
You know what I mean? So if the question is, can it still happen the way it happened for me? The answer is unequivocally yes.
okay,
Is it
hmm,
harder for a person to be in that position to do that? Yes,
okay,
because you're not living in the same world. You're living in a world where, yeah, you have a Spotify thing running and, something tickles your ear. But, I mean, I have actually found in being part of that world now, currently, that I'm okay with not getting a whole album up front out of the gate.
okay.
It's a band that did pretty well maybe like 3 years ago from England called Wet Leg. Do you know them?
Never heard of them.
Two female front people. They got extreme hype because they were reminding a lot of people like my age of like the bands that we loved when we were teenagers because they're like super upbeat, super kind of new wavy punk attitude, great 2 minute songs, that kind of thing. And they
Okay,
were releasing one song at a time for about a year. And then they dropped their album, which contained maybe like four more songs than we
mhm,
had heard. And it almost seemed like the most brilliant thing to me because each song was getting its own individual attention by me as a listener because
Okay.
they roped me in with their first single, which like it was kind of like everybody's into this song. So I was like, all right, well, I got to see what this is about.
Mhm.
And then a very good friend of mine, an old high school buddy of mine, who our whole friendship is rooted in our love for music and certain styles, and he's still an avid concert goer as well. And we saw Wet Leg at I'm sorry, Underground Arts in Philadelphia, and in the front row. And when you see a band like that, where they're like right there, you're gonna have a connection with them.
Mhm.
They'll never play a place that small again. They play at Glastonbury now. You know,
Okay.
so um, so I would say that that is an example of me kind of like living in this singles world and still kind of having a moment
Okay. All right.
in the sort of gradual it was more like it's an onion and you're peeling back the layers, you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? So and I get a lot of pleasure out of listening to the full album now, which I bought on vinyl,
Hmm.
and it's essentially the same experience or similar
Okay.
experience. So I do think that there's a ground in all of this where you can absolutely have those what we'll call old school experiences with current artists, but it takes a level a little more dedication than maybe we had to have back in the day.
Okay. And that's
You
fair.
gotta you gotta seek it out. You gotta
Yeah.
seek it out.
And I think also I have a little bias in this because I am more of an album guy. Like I won't even listen to the singles. I want the whole album experience, put it in, normally CDs, because I even have the other one here,
Wow. There you go.
and I like to just put it in, push play, not skip around. And I Spotify and Apple Music and all those other ones kind of take that experience away, I think, sometimes. So,
I mean, it's absolutely different. But
mhm.
we all have to sort of curate our own lives. You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Sure.
And so it's been very cool for me to observe the resurgence of vinyl,
Mhm.
because as recently as 10 years ago, like indie artists were not putting vinyl records out.
Right.
Too expensive, you
Mhm.
know, and you don't want to get. I actually am stuck with like lots of boxes of this John and Brittany album that we put out and then promptly broke up on when it was released. But like,
Uh-huh.
but with the long game, I was very, very like I was like, I gotta put this out on vinyl, and it has proven to be a good decision. Like
Great.
it's been really well received. It sounds great on vinyl, and and that's just an example of like something old being new again. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah. I want to talk a little bit about fandom. I think is the way I'm gonna put this because you mentioned meeting someone who you really looked up to. At one point, you end up in a van with them driving to a party, and you ended that kind of
Ian,
chapter with. Yeah, well,
yes.
I wasn't going to say the name. I was going to have you
Oh,
say it. I'm
I'll
not going to
say it.
say it. And you ended that chapter with "Never meet your heroes," as the saying goes, or close to that.
Mm.
Did that incident shape how you dealt with fans moving forward in the terms of in the back of your mind going, I never want one of my fans to have this kind of experience walking away from meeting me?
I don't think it was conscious, but I do think that's my attitude.
Okay.
Like I mean, look, it's not at that level for me.
Mm-hmm.
But by the same token, I do have like regular online interactions with fans, and I for a long time, I basically was uncomfortable with the word itself.
Okay.
It's like you're all just friends that I don't know that well, like,
Mhm.
but now I'm comfortable with the term. And the thing about it is that, um, yeah, I want anybody who likes what I do to have some level of access to me as a human, because I think that part of the appeal of my particular brand of art is its humanity, you know? So now that's not to say that I at times don't have to exercise boundaries, like we all must in whatever relationships we have. Um, so it's something that back to your original point, like that encounter that so soured me. And I still put on Echo and the Bunnymen albums all
Okay.
the time. Like I separate the art from the artist, I guess.
Yeah.
Not everybody does that,
Hmm.
like there's bands out there that I think are like empirically good that I don't like because they're assholes.
Hmm.
I mean, like you got to be as good as Echo and the Bunnymen for me to like overlook you.
I mean, I was just cracking up reading that section because he's yelling, "Get off the exit!" And you're like, "There is no exit like that. There is." No... I'm just
The
cracking
exit
up
for
reading that.
Pontiac, yeah. We'll always my I don't talk to our old tour manager all that much these days, but once in
Hmm.
a while we'll have like get back into contact, and always like take the exit for Pontiac. And it's but it's also one of those things where it's like it would be so much less interesting if he was just nice. Like,
Exactly.
I
You'd miss
mean,
out on that. So.
I think that that's part of that whole British rock star thing.
Mhm.
That's why people are so obsessed with like, Liam and Noel, is
Oh,
because they're
I'm a massive Oasis fan,
so
and
dysfunctional.
I saw them on the tour they were on with the Black Crows when they toured
Mm,
together, and it was called the Tour of Brotherly Love, which I thought was absolutely hysterical because at the
yeah,
time
brilliant.
neither one of the groups was getting along. So it
Right.
was,
They all
yeah,
hated each other.
yeah. I wanted to talk about another quote. And this one was towards when you realize you're getting dropped after this released, or right
Right.
around the time this released. And you're at after a festival or a concert signing autographs and being interviewed for a radio, and it said, but things can look different to someone tumbling down to the foot of the mountain than to someone making their ascent to the top. Although this radio banner was virtually indistinguishable from all the promos we had done in the past 3 years, I wanted to make it be a moment because I didn't really know if I would ever have such a moment again.
Wow.
Um, that's almost a heartbreaking quote when you when you read that. Um,
Pretty heartbreaking, but at the time it felt very. I mean, we were very heartbroken, like because um, it's interesting, even though eventually we would have been dropped.
mhm.
At a certain point in that process, we proactively asked to be released
Okay.
because we wanted to shop the record around to someone else, but they wouldn't let us do that either.
Hmm.
So it's almost like every door you try to open, you're finding to be locked in that situation, because there are doors in the around, but like they're all locked.
Hmm.
At that point, obviously, the part of the story leading up to that moment, which is the hospitalization of our guitar
Yep.
player back in Delaware,
Yep.
that just felt like the straw that just broke the back. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And, um, so having that moment at that radio station in Michigan was a very heavy thing. Like we knew, uh, you know, back then bands weren't like reuniting all the time like
Yeah.
they are now.
Yeah.
We truly did think that it was the end. The Caulfields have obviously played numerous times in the past 30 years,
Hmm.
Um, but in that moment, that's like the culmination of everything that you've worked for coming to an abrupt halt. And that was rough. It was definitely
Hmm.
rough.
And you mentioned like in that moment that you were, it seems, just trying to soak it all in because you understood what this was going on, because you even mentioned in the book, this is
Right.
our last show. You that's when you dropped the bomb on the radio station. This is our last show.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. Like, when you do something repetitively over and over again, like you get up, you get in the van, you drive 7, 8 hours, you go to the thing, you do the radio promo, it becomes very, very cyclical, repetitive. And you can obviously start to take those opportunities for granted. Like if you only got to go on the radio once, you would drink it in, like
yeah.
everything about, and that's what it felt like had to be done in that moment.
Okay.
Because, I mean, little did I know I would have lots of those kinds of moments still in the offing, but like you don't know that. And tomorrow is never promised. So in that whatever split second the decision was to blurt that out,
Huh.
um, that's probably what was going through my head.
Now I want to talk a little bit about Ike. And in particular, one section of the book that I didn't even know about, that you all played for Bon Jovi. That stunned
Mm.
me when I heard that. Um, when I was reading through that chapter, where Jackson kind of invites you out late to, what was it, Grape Street?
Yep.
Okay.
Hmm.
And what was running through your head as you're there? Because you're kind of thinking, what on earth is going on? And then you see Jackson and everything. Kind of what was the
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, like, I was so if I'm remembering correctly, like I was just so out of sorts because I didn't feel like I was even ready to play, and we were due on stage to play. I think I hadn't peed, I hadn't done anything that
hadn't
you
had your
do.
pineapple yet? Hadn't had
Right.
your
I wasn't in the pineapple at that point. Like I
okay.
didn't, like that came later. Um, but yeah, I literally had no clue what was going on.
Okay.
But like, one of my friends, who I think I do say this in the book, like was like dropping coy hints backstage, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't know what it is. I literally don't know. Maybe
Mhm.
I don't know. Like, hey, you want a new pack of guitar strings, John? Enjoy.
Mhm.
Like who knows? So, and the thing about this Bon Jovi thing was that in every other market, I believe it was a contest. And Ike was not that into being in contests.
Yeah.
Like you read the part when the John Fay Power Trip, which was the band that preceded Ike,
Uh-huh.
had to do like the battle of the bands
Yeah.
in order to open for REM.
Yeah.
I was like, that's it. I'm 33 years old. This is like something you do in 11th grade. Like be in a battle of the bands. So, um, like that whole Bon Jovi thing wasn't even on my radar because I was like, I'm not doing that. There would be no reason for me to do that.
Hmm.
So to be kind of like just appointed as the Philadelphia band to do this was pretty wild. Like it doesn't necessarily seem like the right or like a compatible thing on the surface. But in a lot of ways, it wasn't that incompatible either, because, even though like we're not cut from sort of the same cloth in terms of like the scenes we came up in, and, they're more hard rock, metal,
Hmm.
hair band, whatever. Um, they're still a they're still a song band.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so, like us getting up and playing our slightly less distorted songs still resonated with their audience because they're songs. Like they got good choruses and you can remember them, and they appreciated that. You know what I
What
mean?
kind of crowd was it at? Was it Atlantic
Boardwalk
City,
Hall.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What
So,
kind of crowd was it there? Was it just 100 people that were just straggling in, or was it pretty
no,
packed?
it was pretty much capacity by that point.
Cool. Okay.
It doesn't always happen,
Yeah. Hmm.
but you know, we lucked out.
Hmm.
It was just whatever, I had nothing to do with like the organization of like what time the opening band goes on and this and that and how much time is there between acts and what have you. But like when we went out on that stage, I was like, okay.
Oh, I get it now. Yeah.
We are. I mean, it was definitely the biggest indoor venue that I had ever played. I
Okay.
mean, Caulfields played to like probably twice that number outdoors, but for an arena, that's a different feeling. That's a completely different vibe when it's all enclosed and you kind of hear the all the sounds. I mean, I think in the chapter, like I talk about it sounding like, at 1 minute a cacophony, the next a symphony kind of a thing.
Hmm.
And it really was that, it was like you now know what like roughly 10,000 murmuring people sound like. And then when they like your song, the sound of that many people clapping and cheering is incredible. There's nothing like it.
That's awesome, and you hit on something that I didn't even think about. There in a musician's mind a different, I don't want to say different mindset, but a different feeling playing like an outdoor festival versus an inside arena like that. Is there?
I think. I mean,
Okay.
I'm a very pro indoor conditioned air kind of guy.
Okay. Hmm.
Like I'm not I don't really gravitate toward like, oh, let's go play in the hot sun in the middle of the day and die of heat stroke. And, like that's not my vibe at all. I've done it and I will do it when the opportunity is correct. But I'm very much like, let's be in an enclosed place where everybody's there for the same reason and everybody's making like this joyous, united noise together.
Okay.
So yeah, for me, it's night and day,
Okay.
like,
All right.
um,
I just
but
want to go ahead. Hmm?
no, I was just gonna say like, um, even like in smaller situations, like you can get that same feeling. Like I'm sure Jealousy Curve and I both got that feeling at Grape Street too.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's just a matter of like if you're on the same wavelength as the crowd. And in many ways, because we were the opening act at that Bon Jovi show, it doesn't even rank that high in my mind as like the high highs of like dopamine hits of playing,
Okay.
much cooler to play in front of your own 300 strong crowd where they're like going batshit crazy for you. I mean, it's cool. I'm not, let's see, that's the thing. It's like, I don't ever want to seem like I'm not grateful or I'm not happy that that experience happened. But I do think that part of why I wanted to write about that kind of stuff is to really let people in on a musician's perspective about that stuff, which is not necessarily the same as what a general music fan might perceive it to be, which
Yeah.
is like, this is it. This is the pinnacle.
Right. Because when you hear,
The
oh, I played for
pinnacle if
Bon
you're John
Jovi.
Bon Jovi. It's not the pinnacle if you're the opening act, but it is a great opportunity.
Sure. Hmm.
And we did get a great crab cake out of it, I will say.
Yeah, yeah, I remember you hearing that. You walk into the green room and you said you'd never seen a green room like this before.
No,
It's
that does stand as the pinnacle of green room hospitality treatment. Nothing has come close.
um, I wanted to pull a quote from a chapter or about Lisa. Okay,
Sure.
because I think this quote is such. I don't want to say sage advice, but it's definitely a good cautionary quote for anyone who's in their college sweetheart, progressing in that relationship. Because you
Mhm.
say, So where did that leave Lisa and me? We were leading separate lives, no longer partners in crime, both feeling undesired and unvalidated. It seemed as if parenthood was the only true connection that remained. And I think couples definitely today have that. Then it
Mhm.
says our youth was over and the things that seemed so foundational in our 20s were now just memories, like so many spring break photos tucked away in a Ziploc bag. Um, to me, when I read that, that's the best piece of advice in the whole book. I want to say that because we have a tendency to romanticize those relationships of our youth that
Mhm.
don't have a lot of foundation as we grow older. Would you agree, disagree with that, or?
I mean, look, we could have like a whole separate conversation on my opinions about like institutions in this culture.
Mhm.
Um, Lisa and I are still very close.
And you say that in the book, which I thought was great. That
Yeah.
you say that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And well, I needed to make it clear that like I wasn't, like it takes two to
Mm-hmm.
make something work and two for it to kind of
Mm-hmm.
like not go the way you want. I mean, I would say that, yeah, I mean, God bless all, I don't know what percentage of the population are high school sweethearts, college sweethearts that make it into their later life together and are
Mm-hmm.
genuinely happy. I know for a fact that they do exist.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that the circumstances of somebody in the line of work that I was doing, that's just a different way of life. And if your partner is not part of that way of life, which Lisa was not, then inevitably it's going to be harder to connect or find points of connection. Now, she veered off into her own particular life also, you know? And so at every turn, aside from having these two kids that we have, um, our compatibility was less and less, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And um, and I don't hold any grudge about it. Like I'll give you like a small example of like my mentality. I've had like very crazy conversations with some friends, like when we're talking about the state of relationships or what have you. And I once said, and I'm not saying that I totally stand behind this because I just blurted it out, but I was like, you know what? I think like relationships should be like, sports contracts. You know what I mean? You sign like a 3-year deal, and if like things are going good, you do the extension. I don't
but
see what's wrong with that. And I
but
also, because I have embraced change so much as I've gotten older, I'm like, it didn't work out after 3 years. You had 3 good years. See, that's one of the things that like I feel pretty strongly about is that like our culture indoctrinates us to believe that the only thing that's worthwhile is the thing that lasts forever. And hate to break it to anybody, but there's no such thing as forever.
Mhm.
And so a lot of hearts get broken because they're clinging to that idea that, oh, I was with him for like X number of years and now we broke up. What a waste of X number of years.
Mhm.
And I call bullshit on that, Like I
Mhm.
think that you should learn from every single experience you have. And I would be willing to bet that if you really rolled back the tape, you had a lot of good times.
Yep.
So it's not how something ends for me. It's how you spent the journey of that particular relationship, length of a band, friendship, whatever.
And
That's how
that
I.
that is great. I agree with you 100% there that, we seem to have, well, something comes to its natural end and you failed. No,
Right.
it's come
No,
to its natural end is all it is.
correct.
So
That's how I view a lot of just about everything at this point.
So you had there's a couple really funny things, couple really funny lines in the book, and I'm going to save the one that had me howling.
Okay.
But I want to go back just a little bit. You're talking about a Taylor Dane show at the Chestnut, and you described a man I've never heard anyone describe like this, and I was almost on the floor dying. It was like watching Mikhail Baryshnikov trapped in the body of Mr. T. What on earth?
It's so true. He was a very, very large, athletic, and menacing black man in a unitard on a headband, dancing, dancing with myself, as Billy Idol would have said.
No, but the one that
Having the best time. Like that guy had the best time of any person in that venue that night.
there was no care in the world, right? He did not care who was looking. Okay. But the one that had me laughing, and simply because one of the places I vacationed for the last like 6 years now is Lancaster. And you said, I'm like, how did I miss this? How did I miss Amish Woodstock in the field in Lancaster? What on earth was that? Explain that.
Well, I wouldn't say that Amish Woodstock was a very highly promoted event. It was more so a sort of like a hyped up house concert kind of event, but like a lot of people there because the guy had a big ass farm, you know what I mean? So, you're playing out in like the cornfield backdrop or whatever. And and they were very, very, it was very campy, which I loved about it. And yeah, I don't remember too much else about it other than they had like a little individual sized chalkboard when you walked in with a very cool kind of like block letter thing that said Amish Woodstock, make a donation in the bucket kind of thing.
That is awesome. I read that and I was like, oh, that is hysterical. That is so funny.
I love that part of Pennsylvania a lot, actually. Like I think it's a really, really beautiful area. And it's funny. A lot of people passed through there back in the day because Lancaster had the Chameleon Club, if I'm not.
No, that was right outside of Lancaster. It was in that same vicinity. I don't think it was in Harrisburg. I think it was in that area.
Chameleon was Lancaster area.
Okay, yeah. The Dragonfly was Harrisburg. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, yeah. And Lancaster now, well, it's not in Lancaster, it's in Lidditz, has Rock Lidditz, where so many people go to set up their tours and stuff like that. So yeah. I always like to end with 5 questions. Nothing pertaining to anything that we've talked about, just fun questions to get to know you a little better. What is one place you've always wanted to visit but never have had a chance to go to, and why do you want to go there?
Ireland.
That's my answer too. So yeah.
It's half of my heritage. It's been very, very underserved.
Okay.
In my life up to this point, and I actually have I wouldn't say a ton, but like I know a handful of genuine Irish people who live in Philly.
Okay.
They are just the coolest people, and I would like to visit there.
See, I want to go there. I love taking pictures. I'm like, not a great photographer, but I love taking pictures. I just want to go there and take pictures of like the coastline and that area. Yeah. Oh, so gorgeous, so gorgeous. Yeah. What's one album everyone should own?
Everyone should own.
Yeah.
Are you saying, but they don't?
Well, no. Just if someone was to say, I've never bought an album before, and I'm walking into, if you can track a record store down, I'm walking into a record store.
No, everybody should own.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, there's obvious answers, which I think are boring. Like Pet Sounds is already one that I feel very strongly about.
Hmm.
I would rather say like what's an album that nobody really owns that they should own.
Okay, go that way with
And
it.
there are a few that come to mind. I mean, and obviously like a lot of people do own it, but like a record like Girlfriend by Matthew Sweet, in my
Hmm.
opinion, a perfect record. Um, I mean, I don't know. There's like so many.
Okay,
Um, Years ago, I forget, it was probably like in the 2010 realm. There was an artist named Ida Maria. I don't know if you ever heard of her.
I have not.
The She might have been like from Iceland or something, like very, very not as weird as Bjork at all.
When you
But
say
like,
Iceland, I think that might have been why I haven't heard of her.
yeah,
'Cause
but like her first record like just blew me away, and I
okay.
still listen to it. And it's basically like um just really, really great kind of like, I mean, it's pretty punky, but it's so melodic, and the songs are just like so fun. And there's just something about it, and it's definitely one of those like I would play it front to back and never skip a song, like the
Hmm.
no skip mentality,
Yeah, and I'm going to have to pick that up then because those are the kind of
Yeah, I
albums I
mean,
like.
it's
That yeah.
like a lot of it has to do with like her voice because she has such an impassioned vocal delivery.
Okay.
And it's just cool, and it's not like the combination of the way she sings and the songwriting, it just does it for me. It's like right in my sweet spot.
Okay. All right. What's the best movie or TV show you've watched the last year?
I'll be honest, I don't watch a lot of any of that
Okay.
stuff. So best, I mean, it would be silly to even say like a movie because I don't watch that many. TV shows. I mean,
Well,
when I
let's
want to
tweak it
watch
for you.
when I want to watch a show,
Uh huh.
it's generally like comfort food of TV, like, Law and Order SVU or
Okay.
something.
So yeah,
You
just to
know?
have something kind of on in the background while you're doing something
No,
type
I
thing.
don't just have it on. I mean, I
Okay.
want to see the same plot repeated every episode
Exactly.
as they
Yeah.
do. And just how many variations on,
Well, let me tweak the question then. I'll go back to the album question then. What's one movie everyone should watch once before they die?
um, probably not a.
Mhm.
You definitely have to separate the art from the artist, but I'm a big fan of Annie Hall.
Okay. Woody Allen. Yep. And that's
Like
definitely a
I mean, I'm a big Godfather guy. I watch that at least once, if not twice a year.
good.
Um, I also really, there are some movies that I think, were kind of like cult classics. Ghost World is another favorite of mine.
Okay.
Um, Gregory's Girl. Did you ever see
I
that?
haven't heard of no, I haven't seen or
It's
heard of that one.
Scottish. When
Okay.
I was like 14, it was on HBO, and I watched it probably like 60 times.
Okay. All
And
right.
it's a fantastic like coming of age kind of like growing up movie, but it's Scottish people, and it's hilarious. It's very heartwarming. It has one of the stars. This is just, I'm getting into like huge minutia right now, but
Mm-hmm.
one of the stars was the lead singer of this 80s band called Altered Images.
Hmm.
Do you remember? Happy birthday. Dun, dun, dun.
Can't say I've
And,
heard that one. No.
MTV early years, big
Okay.
video. He was one of the stars of the movie, so I think I just have this connection slash crush about it, But
Okay.
great movie. But I'm not a cinephile, as they
Sure.
say.
Sure.
So I'm really naming all the movies I know right now.
So which Godfather, one or two?
Oh, one.
One. Okay. Okay.
I love
Okay.
Godfather. But if you want to start getting into that, I'm a big Rocky 3 guy, which is why I brought up Mr. T. Um,
Okay. Here's the next one. You can ask one person in history, living or dead, any question. Who would that person be, and what would be the question?
You're exposing my total lack of curiosity. Let's see. Um, anyone in history?
Hmm.
See, that's a lot of pressure because if you don't ask, you know, Hitler, like, what the fuck's your problem? Then you're an ass. Like um, I'm gonna have to just sort of like think about that one. I'll get
Okay.
back.
Okay. Well, here's the I did movies, I did music. So what's one book everyone should read in their life? Not counting your
Um,
own.
not counting the yin and the yang of it all. Well, let's see. A distant second. um, I always loved Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut,
Okay.
which is a weird little 70s, sci-fi kind of book. There was just something, and again, like a lot of these things, like I experienced for the first time in a very formative period of my life. So, like, I think the part of the reason I love it so much is that it really, like a lot of things that you consume in that period of your life, they shape your sensibilities.
Yeah.
So, like, the absurdity of a guy in this book, like, I'll give you like a very, very funny example in chapter 28 of Cat's Cradle.
So you have read it a lot then. Yes.
Um, the guy encounters this elevator operator who he describes as like every time he feels he's making a point, he grabs his buttocks and screams, "Yes, yes!" So when you're like a kid in high, like, it's like you do it for your summer reading or whatever, and you read that, it makes its way into your sense of humor. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
it's almost like the same thing with like watching Monty Python's Flying
Oh,
Circus as a
yeah.
kid. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like, and later as an adult, whatever other comedies, I mean, I'm a 90s young adult, so Seinfeld is a
Yeah.
huge influence. Kids in the Hall.
Hmm.
Like, actually, like I can speak like much more adeptly on comedy than probably film or literature or any of
Well,
that stuff.
when you read the first fourth of the book, I think people get that,
Yeah.
with some of your writing journals that your mom found. I
Yes.
think they
Yes.
definitely get that. So,
They get that sense. Yeah.
well, John, I
We
want to
are
thank you.
products of our surrounding media.
Absolutely. I want to thank you so much for taking the time, John. It's been such a blast. You have anything you want to add as we head out today?
I just want to say thank you, Patrick, because this was super, super fun. And I just had the best time. It just flew by.
I appreciate that. If you want to know more about the conversations I've had, we've already referenced the one with Steve from Jealousy Curve. So if you like Ike, I'm sure you like them as well. You can find it over on the website, patrickryanlewis.com, or it's right here on the YouTube channel as well. And next week, I have we're gonna kind of change completely. Not a musician. I got a couple more musicians coming up though. I can't wait to do that.
Now for
I
something completely different.
Now, exactly. Now for something completely different. I am going to be speaking with the person known as the Gordon Ramsay of addiction recovery. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation. He is British from Manchester, so you better believe there's going to be some Oasis and some soccer talk in the conversation as well.
Ask him what he thinks about Ian McCullough.
Oh, yeah. And until next time, everybody, thank you so much, John. And we'll talk to you all very soon. Have a great night.